Hello, my name is Joey Morgan. I play the Doctor, Auggi, a bunch of other Salarians, and I directed the Scales of Injustice. This is a bit of a passion project, actually. Not many people know this. I'm not sure if I've ever shared this story before, but way back when Brian and Jacob had first started, planning out the novel adaptations, when they first wanted to adapt the New Adventures, and I just happened to be on one of these calls. I was like, "Hey, if you're adapting novels, can we do the Scales of Injustice?" Because the Scales of Injustice was a story that I was always super interested in. You can go back to you go back to the first episode of the Podcast of Death, which was an old podcast that Brian used to do, and we were talking about the Warriors of the Deep in it. And we were talking about Itar. Itar is one of the main Salarian villains in that, and they were talking about in the story how Itar and the Doctor have a bit of a history, how they'd met before, and me and Brian were talking about, is there a story that where Itar actually meets the Doctor? Because Itar is not one of the Salarians back in Doctor Who and the Salarians. None of those Salarians are named Itar, and so so we found out that Itar originally appeared in this book, The Scales of Injustice by Gary Russell. And so I was really interested in it. Add on to that, it's the official exit story of one of my favorite companions, Liz Shaw, and it just sounded like a really interesting story. So of course I sought out the book. I loved the story, and it was one of my top priorities when we first started the novel adaptations. Let alone when I became the head of the novel adaptations, I was like, okay, and Scales of Injustice, we're doing that, and we just kind of went from there. Jacob and Dylan wrote the script for it, and I script edited it, and here we are.
Hello, my name is Jacob Licklider, and I helped adapt The Scales of Injustice. So adapting The Scales of Injustice, we decided, because this was a book where we couldn't really change stuff. It's Gary Russell's big love letter to season 7. So, Spirals in Space through Inferno, all the stories get referenced in the plot, and all the stories get referenced in our adaptation in some way. And we knew, because this was season 7, we wanted this to be 7 episodes long. And to facilitate that nicely, that meant we couldn't cut anything. And it's a book where you don't want to cut anything, because it's so much of, here's a bunch of conspiracy, and here are a bunch of interesting things. And we don't quite know who all of these characters are and what they mean. So adapting this, we actually had 2 people adapt. It was myself and Dylan Heath, aka Lord Slarr. Basically, the way we did this is Dylan took care of the even episodes, I took care of the odds, we checked over each other's work, and we handed it in to Joey for script editing. And this was one of those very, very weird adaptations where while we did a lot of stuff with them, we had this be mostly straight. The hard part is it just took a while, because 7 episodes is a lot of script to fill. And we added a couple of additions to the book, kind of to, not improve it, but give a little treat to the audience, and, just about everything that the story does. And it just creates interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how this actually turns out, because it's definitely going to be interesting. And of course casting, this was probably one of the hardest casting decisions we've done yet. We had, the most auditions, and just so many roles to fill, that everyone is essentially doing the best that they can.
Hello, my name is Brian Corrigan, and in The Scales of Injustice, I played about half of the Salarians in this story. So, I'm just gonna jump straight into what behind the scenes like this was like. This was a rough one for me to record. It didn't start out rough, actually. It actually started out pretty fun. I got a basic idea of how I wanted all the characters to sound from Joey, and then I created their voices, just sort of as I went along with the script, and I was actually making some pretty decent progress in a pretty timely manner, which Joey and Jacob will both tell you doesn't always happen. Suffice to say, I didn't end up in a very good spot right around the time I was going to start recording episode 4. I had just gone through a breakup, and I only had 2 or 3 weeks left to record Scales of Injustice, which, if I had been going at the pace I had been going at, would have been just fine. I probably would have finished recording about a week in advance, but that didn't happen. And so the last week of recording, I started scrambling to get the lines together. So overall, what started out as a really fun story for me very quickly turned into something that was stressful. So, the characters themselves. Let's talk about what went into each of the characters. Who do I want to talk about first? Because I think I have about 4 to talk about. We'll talk about them in order of least exciting to most exciting. So, least exciting... God, I can't even remember his name. It's not Chuck and it's not Auggi, but he's some guy who talks to Auggi a lot, I think. Anyway, he was sort of just a stereotypical Salarian voice that I decided to go with. It was fine. It wasn't anything special, really. He was just, that fun, basic Salarian that I like to play. Next up is probably Bao. Bao was a bit harder to play, mainly because I made the mistake of giving him a somewhat high-pitched but raspy voice. It doesn't come across like that in the voice modulation, obviously. It's sort of like... The best way I can describe it is sort of mid-range Silurian, and he sounds really good, but his voice was really hard on my vocal cords. It was really hard to sustain that voice for a couple hours at a time, because I sat down and, one episode would take an hour to 3 hours out of my day, and it was fine. I was willing to put in the work, but holy hell, a lot of water was consumed while playing Bao. Bao was, definitely the hardest of the Silurian voices to pull off, and if I do it again, I'm probably gonna stay away from doing a voice like Bao's as much as possible. If it's a minor character, it'd probably be fine, but no more major characters in that mid-range. So, the next character I should probably talk about is Tawny. So, Tawny was much easier. In fact, all 3 of these guys were much easier than Bao. Bao was easily the most painful one to record for. The rest of them were, sort of sweet releases when I got to record for them and not Bao. So, Tawny is her voice is very different from Bao's. Basically, that is me doing a really, really bad impression of Lala Ward into my microphone and modulating it and pitch shifting it slightly. And I think it works really well, actually. I think it came out great. Because, I obviously played them back and listened to them to make sure they were good enough to send off to Joey. And, Tawny might be, of the 2 big Silurians I play, she might be my favorite. Because, I don't know, I just had a lot of fun playing her. And, it was just a lot of fun to sort of play around with her voice and see what my limits were, see what I could do. And I think she was definitely my favorite of the major Silurians. And the last character I'm going to talk about is, of course, Itar. I was really, really looking forward to this story simply because of the fact that I got to play Itar. And just... I don't know, something about him. Warriors of the Deep, not that great a story, but Itar's easily the best thing about it. And just he just oozes dramatic goodness. And I tried my best to replicate that here. I hope I succeeded, but I don't know. It's just so good when I get to play Itar. I love playing him. He's great. I will play him for eternity if someone asks me to. It's something I look forward to on the very few occasions that I get to play him. So I was really, really pleased about that. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. I've probably missed a couple minor voices here and there. But yeah, other than that, that's me done.
Playing the Doctor in this one is interesting. I've played the third Doctor a few times before. First time being for Brian's project, The Last Mondasian, and my impression in that one isn't the most desirable, to say the least. It's okay, it's all right, but it's nothing special. And then I did another cameo role for Brian, I think in the Goldilocks War as the third Doctor, and I did the third Doctor again in Revelation. And like all of those are at like different stages of experimentation of my third Doctor voice, and so I think I'm finally at a point where I'm properly comfortable in the role. And for fantastic story, I really wanted to get the voice just right for this one.
Hello, my name is Marcus Cotton, and I played Sergeant Benton and the Pale Man. Between the production of two of the earlier plays, I believe it was Time's Crucible and Warhead, Joey asked me if I could do a Brigadier impression, and I said I wasn't sure, but I could try. So, in practice and preparation, I watched a lot of the unit stories and Third Doctor stories, and as I was watching them, I watched Sergeant Benton, and by the time I was watching, I think it was The Daemons, I said, oh, I could do that. So I watched a couple more of the stories where Benton is a prominent figure, like the Green Death. I got the 2 audios he's done, and worked on that impression, and that is ultimately one of the roles I auditioned for. One of the things I noticed about Benton is he has this, I don't want to say lisp, but lisp is the only word I can think of to describe it, like his S's and his soft C's, there's always an H onto them, it's not yes sir, it's yes sir. So in doing my impression, in practicing and prepping for my impression, that was my starting point, and it just kind of took off from there. And one of the things that really helped is I watched a lot of John Levine footage, not just his stuff on the show, but him in interviews and stuff. And one thing I found is that when he's doing Benton, he kind of exaggerates his voice. Like, again, I don't think lisp is the right word for it, but he pronounces it much more as Benton than he does when he's not playing the role. The Pale Man is this fascinating figure. He's kind of that government conspiracy man in black. He sits in the shadows and pulls the strings and owns everything type of character. He's really fascinating, and he was a lot of fun to play. One of the things I wanted to do when I set out to do this role is I didn't want to play him like I played the other villains. I didn't want to play him like the War Chief or the Process. In other words, I didn't want to be flamboyant. I didn't want to be over the top. I didn't want to be melodramatic, because one of the ways the Pertwee era stands out from the other eras of the show is just how, in air quotes, realistic it is. He's a lot of his Earthbound stories, a lot of his unit stories, he's not fighting these megalomaniacal alien warlords. He's not fighting these greedy despots hungry for power and conquest. They are very realistic, and that's something I wanted to portray with the Pale Man. So really all I did in terms of performance was I just deepened my voice a little bit. And, I do hope that all the nuance, I don't think nuance is the right word for it, I do hope that all the subtlety does manage to come through in this performance. And I certainly hope that even though they're PDAs and not virgin novels, that we will get to do the rest of the Pale Man trilogy.
Hello, I'm Cavan Gilby, or the Captain, I think I'm credited as. and I'm playing the role of a chap simply known as the Friend. Before going into this, I'd not read Scales of Injustice, the original book, but I had a vague kind of awareness of what was going on in the story, that it was a follow-up to Doctor Who and the Salarians, a story I'm not much of a fan of, but I can understand why people enjoy the moral argument in it. But no, so my first proper experience was through the script for this audio play. And reading through it, there is a great political espionage angle going on here that feels very appropriate for villains like the Salarians, so I'm very excited to see how that comes out when the whole thing's edited and released for you all to hear. So that's fun, isn't it? It's going to be a good story, I reckon.
And then there are the Salarians. Yeah. There are like, I think 10 Salarian characters with lines in the whole thing, something like that. If not, it's close to 10. And I said to Brian, I'm like, Brian, you can't play all of them. He threw out the idea. He was like, hey, I want to play all the Salarians. And I'm like, nope, I'm not letting you play all 10 Salarians. So not only are the Salarian roles, and Sea Devil roles for that matter, split between us, but we also gave one of the roles to our good friend Ark, or Corey Williams, as people who know the novel adaptations know him. And I had Brian like send me a tutorial, basically like how to do the Salarian voices, and I was like, okay, here's how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna take these roles, you're gonna take these roles, and we'll take it from there. And I think we did an okay job in the end.
Hello, my name is Joshua, and I played Corporal Farley and PC Harriet Trill in the Scales of Injustice. So yeah, I was so excited to get involved with this one, as I heard many great things about Scales over the years. The first time I heard about it was when it was advertised by Who Won in Doctor Who magazine, as they were still selling some of the books. Looking at the script, Dylan and Jacob both did a brilliant job at adapting it, and I have to applaud them for that, and also to everyone at Security Kitchen Productions. For Corporal Farley, I wanted to give him a British accent, as I wanted to pay tribute to the unit soldiers in Classic Who, as they mostly had British accents. And also, another reason was that I had to think of a different voice, as there was one scene where Farley and Harry were chatting to each other, and that was kind of funny there. For Harry, I decided to just use my normal voice, as I pretty much use my normal voice with some of the other adaptations I've been involved with. When I finished recording my lines, I actually decided to go back and read The Scales of Injustice, and upon reading it, it was actually a very good book. Gary Russell, of course, matched the tone of Season 7 very perfectly. And when I was reading it, I could definitely hear the voices of John Pertwee and Caroline John. And for that, I want to congratulate Gary Russell for that. And of course, like I also said, I wanted to congratulate Dylan and Jacob for doing a brilliant adaptations. And to everyone at Security Kitchen Productions, you all do brilliant adaptations. And I'm happy to be involved with them.
So yeah, that was The Scales of Injustice, easily the largest and most insane project we've ever done, with the largest cast we've ever had to put together, and I couldn't be happier with it, honestly. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing this story to life. So yeah, thank you all so much. And especially a thank you to all of our wonderful cast members, everyone that helped out on this project in any small way or large way. You're all the absolute best. Yeah, so I guess that about does it. That was The Scales of Injustice. On to the next one.